Hello! I hope you're having a wonderful day. Today I'd like to teach you how to make a nice flower painting. I'm starting out with drawing a zinnia in the center. I really like zinnias. Their petals are really pretty and layered, and I think that the zinnia shape makes a really nice middle flower and draws the eyes to the center of the artwork, which is what I wanted. Zinnias come in a ton of pretty warm colors, but I think that when I start painting, I'm going to make mine a darker pink with a yellow center. I think that'll end up looking really nice. Next, I'm drawing my morning glories. Morning glories are really round flowers that come in blues and purples, and I thought that the flatness of them would stick out next to all the layered petals of a zinnia. Morning glories are so pretty and unique looking, I would totally plant some in my garden. I'd also like to apologize for the smudginess of my eraser. You'll see it in a little bit. I'm using a really old eraser that just kind of smudges everything around instead of actually erasing the pencil. It's so annoying and makes the sketch look really gross. I swear it'll go away once I start painting. But anyway, morning glories are actually really easy to draw. They're like blobby circles with a small circle in the middle and some lines coming out to show the folds of the petal. The zinnia wasn't that hard to draw either. It's just layering petals over and over again with a circle in the middle. Now I'm drawing the gardenias. I really like them. They remind me of roses a little bit for some reason. I just think they're really pretty. They were a bit harder to draw though. I started out with a circle, then started drawing some like rose petal-like shapes around the center of the circle to make it look a little more flower-like. While you're drawing, you can fill any places that look bare with more petals, and boom, you have a gardenia. In my case, a rather smudgy gardenia, with all of those eraser smudges. But it's still really fun to draw, and I think it came out really well. Once you put your mind to it, it's easier to do than it looks. Next we move on to daisies. I love daisies. I think they're a really cute, pretty flower. I'm just not the biggest fan of drawing them. Even though they're pretty simple, it's just a circle with some petals sticking out, I feel like they always look weird when I draw them. They're always either looking off or not symmetrical or just even too simple. I always either make the petals too close together or too far apart, or I make them too short or too long. I just can't win when I draw daisies, which is a shame because they're really pretty. They fit in so well with the other flowers that I've drawn too. They're simple enough that they don't clash with the more detailed flowers, but they're also eye-catching. They're just really nice. I also love that daisies can come in so many different colors, and if it doesn't naturally come in a color, daisies are just really easy to dye that color. That's why you can get like red or yellow or pink daisies. I just love daisies, except for drawing them. Finally, I'm drawing a few daffodils. I know I've said this about every flower, but I absolutely love daffodils. They have a really unique, different shape, and I love that banana yellow color. Daffodils just stick out wherever you put them, and I love that. I wanted to put daffodils in this piece because I wanted to incorporate a yellow. I really want a painting just full of warm, bright tones. Now, the problem with daffodils is that they're not the easiest to draw. You start with a circle and then draw lines coming down to make it like a cylinder. Then, you draw petal shapes coming around the center, forming a lion's mane. There's also some frills at the top to create the detail. And make sure to add some lines on the petals to make them look a little more realistic. So as you can see, I'm starting to finish up my sketch of the original flowers. I just have like this daffodil and another one to go. And then you'll see that I have my final composition all centered around that circle. Now it's time to paint. I'm moving my way inward, starting with my outermost flowers, the daffodils. Before you start painting though, it's best to come up with the colors that you want to use and whether or not they'd look good together. I'm not the best at color theory, but I understand a few things. I'm going to use warm tones like red, yellow, and pink, a warm tone purple, and a warm tone blue. Although purple and blue are cool colors, they definitely have some warm variants that would look really nice with the other warm tone colors I'm going to use. I also wanted to use purple because it and yellow are opposites on the color wheel and they have a nice contrast together, and I want a piece with a little bit of contrast in it. I did my other two daffodils off screen, and now I'm painting the inner circle of the daffodil. You can see that at one point I went to press on my paint pen to get more paint out of it, and splat! It all came out. I ended up just working with it and using the wet paint in other sections, but it continued to bother me throughout this painting. You'll probably see it. Now I'm going in with brown paint to add depth to the center of the daffodil. This would also end up giving me problems as the wet brown paint and wet yellow paint ended up mixing together. Now it's time to paint the daisies. I started with the yellow centers on all 4 daisies, and then I began to move on to the purple petals to get that nice contrast with the yellow that I was talking about earlier. You might be able to see that one of my daffodils and the center of one of my daisies that are the same color are overlapping. That's okay. When I go in to shade the daffodil petals, the colors won't look like they're overlapping anymore and it'll look fine. In some places, it definitely took me going over the paint a few times to make it as solid as I wanted it to be. So if you don't want transparent paint, make sure you go over it a few times. I did my other 2 daisies off camera, and now I'm moving on to painting my Morning Glories blue. This blue color is warm enough that I think it looks nice with the yellow and purple. Painting the Morning Glories was super easy, just as easy as drawing them really. I painted most of them blue, the center yellow, and then I used a darker blue to paint the lines, which created a bit of depth. So far, I love this color palette, and I think it looks super nice together. Now I'm going in with a white paint pen and painting the shape of the gardenias completely white. I'm actually not leaving behind any of the initial details that I sketched earlier. I can just go in and draw them and shade them back in later on. I'm also not going to show me painting the other gardenia after this. It's kind of boring. Now I'm finally painting the center of my artwork, the zinnia. Sort of similarly to the gardenia, I'm just going over the details in the sketch with a dark pink. It'd be pretty hard for me to just paint all the details back in with a paint pen, so I'm just going to go back in later when the paint is dry and put them back in other ways. After I painted all pink, I'm going in with a yellow paint pen and painting the center yellow, which, of course, just had to bloom right into the wet pink paint. I accidentally started shading off camera. Sorry about that. But I'm shading the daffodils with the brown paint. I like bold, almost cartoonish colors when it comes to shading and coloring, but it's totally fine if you want a more realistic looking painting. An orange or lighter brown on the yellow would look stunning. I also took a super dark brown, almost black paint, and added some depth to the inside of the center of the daffodil. Now you might be looking at this video right now and be thinking, wow, those flowers really don't look good. And you'd be right, it doesn't look that good right now. But trust the process. I had faith that my hard work would pay off, and I was right. I love the end result, and I think you will too. You also might have noticed that I painted the circle around the flowers pink. It's a pretty warm color, and I think it looks really nice and complements the colors of the flowers really well. And now I'm shading the daisies. I'm not using quite as bold colors as I did with the daffodils, so I'm just using a much darker purple than the base color instead of like a black. I'm working my way around the petals, thinking about where the light would hit them. That's what you always have to think about when you're shading. Where would the light hit this, and where would it be left in shadow? Have an idea of what direction your light is coming from before you even start shading. For instance, mine's coming from the upper right of the canvas, but it's up to you where you want your light to be coming from. I shaded the other daisies and the center of the daisies off camera to save some time, so now let's shade the gardenias. I'm using gray to create the petals and some nice softer shading on the gardenias. I'm being a bit sloppy and loose though, because I'm going to go back in with a fine liner pen and draw in the actual details of every flower. So if my gardenia petals are a little messy, that's okay. They'll be fixed up and look great by the end. Now I'm taking my dark blue pen from earlier and shading the morning glories. I'm putting a little bit of paint where I generally want shading, then taking a dry paintbrush and smudging it out. Morning glories are soft, delicate flowers, so I felt that harsh or bright shading like I did on some of the other flowers would look strange and out of place. Soft brush shading would look better in my opinion. You know, nice soft shading for a soft flower. It takes a little finessing though, as I want it to look blended and brushed out without looking streaky or rough. It's harder to work with than how I normally shade, but I think it paid off and really looked good. Now I'm going to the zinnia and making small pink dots across the flower, almost in an attempt to create highlights. It doesn't look good right now, I'm aware of that, but when I go in with a fine liner, I'll create the petal details around the pink dots and create a more flower-looking form. But right now, it's a bit of a pink dot blob. Now it's finally time for the fine liner, and to bring this whole piece together. I'm using a Sakura micron pen because I love how dark and opaque the ink is, but you can use any pen with dark ink. I don't see why it wouldn't work. So now I'm going in, drawing in details like the lines of the petals and the details at the center of the daffodil. Then I'm going to outline some parts of the petal to give a bold look that'll pop against the white part of the canvas. It'll also help separate it from any other flowers, and it just looks cool. The lines really bring this piece together. There were quite a few times where I wasn't sure this would turn out well at all. But the dark lines on every flower really bring it all together into a cool, cohesive piece. I'm actually really proud of how it turned out in the end. Lining the daisies was much simpler than lining the daffodils. They are simpler flowers after all. I'm just going to line the center of the flowers, draw circles around some of the dots in the middle, and then I'm going to outline the petals. Once I've done all of that, I draw a line in the middle of the petal to make it more detailed and a bit more realistic. I know I said I don't like drawing daisies, but I think it actually came out really well in the end. It just all came together. I really like it. Now I get to move on to my favorite part, lining the gardenias. Maybe it's just me, but I have so much fun doing detailed drawings, so doing the lines for the petals was just so much fun for me. I also think they look super pretty and delicate. They add a nice touch with the daffodils and daisies, and I think they'll still look great when the morning glories and zinnias are added. Just like how they were easy to draw and paint, the morning glories are just as easy to line. I outline the shape of the flower, I outline the dark blue lines for some nice depth, and then I draw some thin lines to add that nice, realistic detail. I also go over the center yellow part. And finally, it's time to line the zinnia. I'm starting with the tiny petals in the middle, and then branching outwards in a circle, drawing larger petals. I'm trying to make it that they go around the pink dots, but honestly, I'm okay with it if they don't. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you have a wonderful day.